And hello, everybody. We've got another Discovering Autism here, and I've got a guest. His name is Gary Berkowitz. He's out of Rhode Island. And Gary, just introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. As Tom said, my name is Gary Berkowitz. I live in Rhode Island. I'm 59 years old, and I just got an autism diagnosis with some other things when I was 54. And one thing I can tell you is that I practiced law for over 30 years and never understood why I wasn't really succeeding at it. And after I got my Asperger's diagnosis, I realized there wasn't really any way I was ever going to.
Wow. So, I think you're probably, I haven't talked to very many males that are late diagnosed around my age. And so it'll be an interesting conversation. But I'm surprised how many people are coming out of the woodwork, so to speak. I joined the National Autism Society. Actually, just they asked me to be on the board, and one of the things that the chair had said to me, she said, "We're getting calls daily of people saying, I need help. I've just been diagnosed. And I said, really? He said, yeah. This is sort of exploding. Matter of fact, it's one of the issues they did nationally at the National Autism Society or gala that they had was late diagnosed adults. So I guess it's a pretty big thing.
Yeah, although it's hard to imagine a bunch of Asperger guys going to a gala somehow.
Well, they're not all. No, it's not. I mean, it's not necessarily for people on the spectrum. It's the organization that supports autism. I mean, it's sort of like. Yeah.
Because if it was for us, none of us would want to go to the gala.
I know what you're saying. It's just like I joined a meetup club that's here in Ohio that. It's funny because nobody shows up. I mean, they just had something today, and for the first time in a long time, I was going out to a restaurant, and 3 people signed up, and I wanted to go, but I had interviews. I wasn't sure when they were going to be, and it just, and of course, I had a heck of a week too. But anyway, but it was like, and here I am again, going, yeah, I really do want to meet these people, but it's like, something came up, So it's like herding cats, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually, since I've realized what I'm dealing with, gotten somewhat better at it, which is one of the reasons that I kind of regret waiting so long to get diagnosed. 'Cause I'm not one of those people. I know there was 2 camps, and one of them is I have Asperger's, and I'm proud of it, and and I'm not going to change, and I just want to be me. And I'm in the other camp of if there are things that I can understand that I'm not doing that I can learn to do that will make me function better, then I'm likely to be happier and I'm likelier to fit in. And so I just look at them as issues to work on, and I know there's a lot of people who feel exactly the opposite, but I'm not one of them. I mean, if I were invited to something and it's probably a better chance that I would want to go, and if it was going to be, a dozen or 2 dozen people, I might actually function. If it was going to be 500 or 600, I'd probably be lost. But I mean, at least for me, now that I understand what I'm dealing with, I've been able to do a better job of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds somewhat like you.
Well, what it has meant to me, and I'm still, this is only, I'm not even a year into this yet, so I mean, I'm really new into this. But one of the things I realized when I found that I was on the spectrum was that there had been a part of me that had been searching for that, whatever it was I could feel that was different. And it really was a part that, for some reason, I did not. I mean, I felt like it's more complicated possibly than just the autism. I told you, there's the other
Right.
comorbid stuff, but also it was. I think there was a part of it was family dynamics with my father. Very oppressive, very controlling, and it played into, I think, the traits of the autism, and to where I basically just shut up. I think in a sense, and I can't say this officially, but I shut down all my life. I basically was in a shutdown mode all my life. It's how, and that's not totally accurate, but as far as I had no, I mean, I probably still really don't feel like I have any idea how. I'm still learning enough about myself to know what it is I even like to do and what I would enjoy. I mean, I know I'm here at 60, so now's not a good time to be thinking about careers, but at the same time, I don't feel like I ever knew myself well enough to be able to say, you know what, this is what I like, this is what I can do, and I can stick with this. As I said, there's other factors involved in that, but I think if I had known, would have been better off career-wise. I probably would have gotten married. I would have been in a relationship that was stable and strong, and so a lot of things like that. I was affected by I'm going to say the autism. It could be other things, but just for this case in point, I'm just going to say it was the autism. To me, it's something I'm embracing. It's like, okay, finally, I can say this is who I am.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that and mention your father, because and you said he was controlling, because when I was growing up, I thought my family was normal, and you looked at it from the outside, maybe it seemed like it was, and it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that I come to realize that narcissism is on both sides of my family, ran very deeply. And when you have Asperger's, you're very vulnerable to a lot of kinds of things, including bullying and controlling, and certainly narcissism. And I only realized in the last few years that in my sort of explains my entire family dynamic. And unfortunately, one of the things that I learned, aside from being the narcissist plaything of my parents, was that I had learned to become one as well. Only I wasn't very good at it. And that's not a recipe for happiness, going through life. And when I was growing up, one of the things that I could do that was, one of the things that I could do that unfortunately covered up a lot of mess was I was very good at school, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, and when I grew up, I was always like, well, you were smart, so you can do this. And I told them you were better than other people because you were smarter than them. Because as a kid, I got bullied a lot, as I suspect most of the people on the spectrum are. Bullied as when they're young, because they're not athletic, because you're not social, because a lot of them they're not interested in sports, or they're not interested in dressing fashionably, or they don't know how to make friends.
Yes.
So for me, I was told, well, don't worry about those people, or your own popularity. You're smarter than them. And first, you're never the smartest person in the room, number one. Right. And when you're told you're smarter than them, and you think you're smarter than them, they just get resentful, and it makes the bullying even worse.
Oh, I see what I see what okay.
And I think the reason I ended up in law school was basically because my father said, my father was a dentist. He said, look, if you're not going to dental school or medical school, then you should go to law school. And when you're Asperger, you're good at arguing with people. So people said, "Oh, you're smart and you like to argue. Law school for you."
That's funny.
It's funny. It's funny until yeah, it is until it is.
No, I know. I don't really mean funny, haha. But that's a funny way of putting it. Like it's like, I mean, it's a funny logic. I'll put it that way. Well, I came sort of from an opposite because, and I wish my parents were alive now. I have so many questions. Oh my God! But I have so many questions. One, I think my father is possibly on the spectrum. I think my sister might be. I think his dad was, because of just.
I can tell from here they all are next. It's hereditary.
Yeah.
I can tell you everybody in my family who has it, and it's a lot of them.
Wow.
And you can never tell them. I have 3 brothers. I'm the oldest, and my next younger brother, his daughter, my niece, is screamingly Asperger.
Wow.
And I said, and she was having and they live like 45 miles from us. We're in Rhode Island. My brother lives up near Brockton, Massachusetts. And it just so happens my youngest son's therapist was the consultant to the school system that my niece was in. And I mentioned it to her, and I said she has these social problems. She had these horrible stomach aches that were sending her home from school when she was in high school, and this and that. And my son's therapist said, "I'm surprised they haven't flagged her for me." I said, "You're describing classic Asperger's symptoms in girls."
Wow.
And I told my brother, I said, "Have you thought about having your daughter looked at?" And it was like I was talking to a wall, because nobody, it's like, it's like a flaw, especially in narcissistic people. Nobody in my family can be not perfect, so none of them can have Asperger's.
Gotcha.
So they don't want to hear it.
Wow.
And on my father's side of the family, I think every single one of them has it, and they all, they're very nice people, and they couldn't be more pleasant, and they all get along, but none of them are tremendously social. We were at a family affair, and we all ended up out. We all ended up out in the lobby of the building because it was, there was a dance, and it was too loud for all of us, and there were the disco ball lights, and
yeah.
all the Asperger people just went out into the lobby.
Oh boy, my sister, she's I suspend. I don't feel like I have enough knowledge to be able to diagnose her myself, of course. But from what I can see of her and what I've known of her all my life, is that we have a lot in common. Now, she knows that I have found that I'm on the spectrum and was diagnosed, and I've talked to her about it, and I gave her actually a YouTube video that was about female Asperger traits, and
right.
I gave that
much different.
Yeah, and I let her see that, and I heard nothing from her, and I thought, okay, that answers that question, Well, and about a month later, she had. We talked about it. She brought it up, I think, and said, I cried during the whole thing. She said all those traits that I could relate to, And I thought, wow, then that means that she's going to accept it. Well, that's the last I've heard of it. And I'm not going to push it. It's not something that you can. I'm not going to, what am I going to say? You have to. But it's just interesting. I'm the exact opposite. To me, this was a revelation. This was a metamorphosis. This was something I have needed all my life. Now, unlike you, I was doing poor in school. I think it was the dyslexia was part of it. I think.
Well, you had all those physical learning disabilities. I had no physical learning disabilities.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I don't think I'm smarter than anybody with Asperger's. Everybody with Asperger's, I've ever met has been very bright, but
Yeah.
and if not, and if not in book learning, then they all every single one of them has some talent, some gift at something.
Yeah.
And it's taken me, and it took me most of my life to understand that just because you can make a big SAT score doesn't mean you're smarter than anybody else. I mean, especially when you're lacking in emotional intelligence. All the SAT scores in the world don't make the slightest bit of difference as to whether you're a happy person or whether
Right.
or whether you can strike up a conversation at a party or hold a job. Doesn't make a bit of difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, boy, I'm going to think about just. Would it be an interesting story? I mean, what was it like before diagnosis then? I mean, did you suspect something? Did you, looking
at... Well, my son was diagnosed, I got diagnosed when I was 54, so he must have been, I must have been 4 or 5 when my youngest son was diagnosed, so we kind of suspected it, and I just didn't really know what was involved. But what had happened to me, over the, was my, I was always in practice for myself as a lawyer. I shared space with other lawyers, but I was never in a law firm because the narcissistic part of me didn't want to work for anybody else and didn't want to pay his dues professionally, like as I should have, and some of the clients, a lot of my clients were business people, small businesses, and a lot of those clients that were, that were the ones that were writing me a check every month, would go, sooner or later, they would go out of business. You would lose them. I mean, one client was in a field that was destroyed by technology, and another client who owned a small factory, who was an alcoholic, who drank himself to death, and when he did that, the business crashed with him, and this and that. And I got to a point where my law practice was falling apart, my marriage was falling apart, and I was doing all kinds of compulsive, all kinds of compulsive things to avoid, responsibility, deny reality. My whole life was falling apart, and then that was the main reason I think I went finally. So, all right, I'll get an Asperger's diagnosis. That's in fact what I have, because I thought that would be the explanation.
Wow.
And I don't even it wasn't. I think I was just probably as much for any at that point, just trying to figure out why it went wrong and looking for an excuse, to not blame myself. And as I said, I certainly did have Asperger's, and I had depression and social adjustment disorder and anxiety issues, which I realized I realized only way too late. I inherited my anxiety from my father. In fact, I once told my wife, I said, if I ever start acting as anxious as my father, I said, shoot me. If she had taken me up on it, she'd have shot me right as soon as I said it, because it was already way too late. But I didn't see that. I saw it now that that I had all those issues. I didn't see most of my problems until later. But that was why I went and got an Asperger's diagnosis finally, because my life was falling apart, and I was looking for a reason.
I can.
And I got some therapy for the Asperger's, but that wasn't. That wasn't. I mean, it was dealing with my messed up family relationship and all the and all the narcissism going on. Actually, a lot more than the Asperger's. But having Asperger's is certainly what opened the door when I was a kid. to being a narcissist victim of my parents, and it certainly contributed to my being bullied and being a miserable kid, because I was a miserable kid.
Yeah.
They sent me off for therapy when I don't remember how old I was, 11, 12, 13, and it didn't really help. I think the reason it didn't really help was because nobody, there were probably five people in the United States, 45 years ago, who could have said, "Oh, you have Asperger."
Right.
So they treated the symptoms. Or
right.
They did what they could, but 45 years ago, having a disease that nobody could diagnose is tough.
Yeah. Well, and I, back when I was diagnosed too, this is what I'd like to ask my parents, because I'm glad they kept. I mean, basically, I remember being diagnosed, and like my mom had said something about, "Oh, yeah, you have ADD and dyslexia." And now, of course, I don't remember her saying dyslexia, but I knew I had problems reading. But there weren't even services. I don't remember any kind of services other than, I think they probably put me in classes that were not the advanced class, and that kind of an adjustment, but not. I didn't get any special tutoring. I didn't get any special anything. And so I pretty much, when junior high rolled around, my grades came up. I started, I started being academically improving, and that was really the end of it. I never thought of it that much since then, and which is a shame, because even if I had considered ADHD or ADD, that it might have changed how I react. I mean, I started off, I was going to be a pilot in the airlines, and I ended up dropping that. I mean, I had 200 hours. I was ready for a commercial and an instrument, so I mean, I'd gone a long way. And I started to be, I was in class. I'm also an aircraft mechanic, a licensed aircraft mechanic, which was part of that time period of my life. And one of the people that's in my class was a volunteer at the deaf school here in Columbus, and he said, and we started talking about sign language and stuff, and I was really interested in it. He said, "Come on out, you can volunteer too." And I did, and I think it was the social, because I was not part of anything social ever in my life. I never felt I belonged anywhere, it's that feeling. And all of a sudden I was around a bunch of people who I felt I could relate to, I felt connected with somehow, and I dropped it, and that's why I learned sign language. I became an interpreter, and I worked with the deaf, blind, multiple handicapped for the rest of my life. But it wasn't. I just was like a Dixie cup in the wind. I blew wherever the wind would blow, and that's what I would take as a job. So I didn't know. I mean, I still have that. I feel like a blank. I have a blind spot in my understanding of myself that there's parts of me I just don't comprehend. That's sort of my goal. The rest of my life is to try to sort of enjoy myself and who I am, and start to figure myself out.
Yeah. Well, when you mentioned the ASL people, American Sign Language people, the thought that entered my mind was perhaps the reason that you felt so comfortable there is because of the acceptance.
The what? I'm sorry.
The acceptance.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
When you're with these people,
yes,
you're with people who are actually glad to have you around.
Yes.
And if you've got your own issues, they don't judge it, and they're very welcoming.
Yes.
One of the things that happened to my wife and me this past summer is we were in Florida, and we were planning to come home for a family event, and then we got a call saying it's not happening. So we had a chance to stay for a couple of extra days in Florida. We changed our flight reservation, and we were looking, what are we going to do? And we got an email It was Gay Pride week in St. Petersburg, Florida. That's where we were, and we had gotten an invitation to march with the transsexuals, who were a group that we didn't have any prior association with, but they said, if you support us, we'd like you if you came out and marched with us, and we'll give you a T-shirt. And we said, okay, why not? And we did that, and they were, and what we found was that they were the, it was like instant acceptance. They were, it was a big parade. It wasn't like there were 5 or 10 people. There were hundreds, but they were very, they were
accepting and
friendly, supportive, and grateful, and accepting, and it felt very comfortable to be with a bunch of people who, if you looked at most of them, if you just walked past them on the street ordinarily, you wouldn't feel that comfortable, perhaps walking past them on the street, but there was that acceptance there, and that and the gratitude that you showed up to support them.
Yeah.
I'm sensing maybe that was the same thing you got with the sign language people.
Yep. It was. I've kind of come to that conclusion too.
And it's the opposite of the feeling of the Asperger's kind of loneliness and and isolation and sort of feeling not accepted.
But I was so deep into their culture. And I was that was my culture. That became my culture as far as I would go. This was back in a time before. The deaf community has changed so much since then. It used to be so isolated because they basically didn't even, except for a few people, they didn't have any way of even communicating other than face to face. So it was a face to face culture, and of course they were isolated from everyone else. So, but I became so involved with that I kind of lost myself in that for a while. But I knew I wasn't deaf. There's only so far you can go until you go, okay, well, yeah, you can learn the sign and you can mingle, but that doesn't mean you're deaf. Well, that's one thing I have found since I have found the autism, is that it's like I feel like I've got a family now. It's the first time I have felt I have a community, or maybe a better way of putting it, because I never really felt part of the neurotypical community. I still don't. It's not that I'm not consciously saying, I don't want to be part of you, but I just had no interest in, over time, I guess it was just, it's like I became more and more isolated, and I feel the exact opposite now. Now it's like that's why I'm doing these interviews and things. It's like I want to be part of that society or that culture. I want to be active in it. And so it's been a whole change for me in that way.
It's kind of, I guess, and I'm not going to say the opposite for me, but since I've discovered what it is, in me that's not what, that was making me, that was giving me, such problems socializing and problems in business and anger issues and all this other stuff. Is, for me, it's since I've kind of, I'm like learning how to deal with that stuff.
Sure.
I feel like let me go out and try again. Now that I'm not so now that I'm not so up the creek without a paddle, and I'm still. I'm not saying, I'm rejecting the autistic community, because I can't. I'm part of it.
Right.
And as I said, one of the first things that I did after getting my diagnosis was I joined the support for adult Asperger's support group on Facebook and a couple of others, but support for adult Asperger seems to be one of the more established and entrenched. And one of the things I had found was, in the beginning, I would see people saying, I'm having problems with this, or I have trouble with that, or I feel like this. And I would either say, I don't have that problem, or I would even find myself saying, that's ridiculous. Why can't you deal with this or do that? And as time went on, I realized that I didn't have it. That a lot of those people who said I have, I have this issue or that issue, I realized, no, I'm that way too, and I don't know why I ever thought I wasn't. Or the people who have issues, for dealing with, just the things in day-to-day life. Either I can't answer the phone, or I have trouble getting myself out the door on time to go to my job, or whatever it is. I've come to realize because something that seems ridiculously easy to me is hard for them, that there are things that are ridiculously easy for other people that I have trouble with.
Yeah.
And like I said, and when you grow up in a family full of narcissists, one of the things you don't see is your own lack of empathy. And one of the things that I've come to learn is that is not only empathy for other people, but but also there's a certain amount of empathy comes from respect. And so I've been using my participation in the website. I made has helped me gain a sense of empathy that I didn't have. And when I comment on the website now, which I do fairly often, I try to be nothing but supportive, and withhold any judgment that I might have had, or any idea that I know what your problem is. It's this or it's that, or you need to do this, or just to give people support, because that was something that was not just an Asperger's problem. Like I said, that comes from the narcissistic way that I was brought up.
Yeah.
But as I said, I'm not trying to immerse myself in fully into the autistic spectrum community, but I don't want to withdraw from it either.
Right.
I'll always be part of it. We have some friends who have a son who has a lot of physical issues, and my wife and I realized, this is probably maybe 4 years ago, that their younger son was probably on the autistic spectrum, and we were at their house one day, and their son announced, he says, I figured it out. I have Asperger's, and we said, yeah, we thought that. We think you're right. We think you do. And it was very insightful of you to diagnose yourself. And then we saw him again a couple of months later, and he decided, because he was getting therapy, and some therapist said, no, you don't have Asperger's, you have problems with members of your family. And he said, I don't want to be in your stupid club. And we just thought, this is somebody, I wasn't angry at him or judgmental. I just thought that he was, just unfortunate that he found the answer, we found what he thought was, his answer, the path, and that he was turning away from it to take out his frustration on the members of his family.
Wow. See, that's why I haven't pushed my sister, because I've worked around people with I don't want to say disabilities, but I'll use that word,
Okay.
And that, and so it's, I don't look at it that way. I mean, I look at it as it's just the way people are, whether you can't hear, you can't see, or both, or whatever. And I'm just, so I don't see a person as less than for any of those reasons. But, and I don't know, my sister might, I mean, so some people really have a mental, it's like, I can't be that. I don't want to be that, because they have their concept of what that means. And, it's almost a phobia.
Yeah.
So
it's a shame. I've mentioned before, our son who was, I think before you started recording, our son who's 21 now and is in college. He had a very, he's very bright, but he had a very difficult time in public high school, and he got services, and one of the problems that he had was that the people in his high school all said, "Oh, you're on the spectrum, you have Asperger's." I dealt with another kid who had Asperger's, and we know how to, we knew how to, what you're up against, and we know how to handle it. And they didn't have a clue. And he had some discipline issues, and he was, and in subjects that he was very good at, he was failing because the way they were teaching it was turning him off. Finally, he ended up applying to a college in Leesburg, Florida, called Beacon, which I would, at this point, put in a plug for. They will not take any student unless he has a learning disability, and Asperger's is considered one. And since he's been there, I mean, he's absolutely flourished. And one of the things that the school says is that officially 22% of their student body is on the spectrum, but our son is a senior now, and we've been down there for quite a few parents' weekends and other things since he's been there. And we met with one of the trustees of the school, and he said the real number of kids on the spectrum is probably 50 or 60%, but some of them just haven't been diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we think the number's a lot higher, and I see a lot of kids with dyslexia, and they're who've been asked at various functions and things, who've been asked to read things, and they sound like they're illiterate, and they're not illiterate. They just have dyslexia, and they're very bright kids, and they're going to graduate from this school because at this college they can because there are accommodations for them. Instead of writing a paper, they can give a presentation. Instead of they're allowed to do visual things instead of writing the spoken word. And the school is very oriented towards making sure that when they graduate, that not only do they know how to get a job, but that they know how to keep it.
Right.
And but you look at the kids who were there, and I said, and you see the dyslexia, and you see the ADHD, and you see a school that says, if you're here, you better have this stuff. And because we deal with it, and we'll teach you how to deal with it. And I can tell you that nothing like that existed before. And when every kid has an issue, then no kid has one.
Right.
And it's so much different.
I went, a number of things that you've talked about, like with the narcissism and with family dynamics, and you're taking me down this road in my past. I'm going through all these different memories, and one was when we moved around quite a bit was another issue I always thought was part of why, you don't have friends because you don't see them very long, and when you move, you just don't keep in contact, and that's just the way life is. So anyway, when I was in third grade, for about a half a school year. We were in one school system, then we moved mid-year. And my sister and I both think about this because that was an excellent, and it still is today in this area, known as an excellent school system. And I remember struggling in school. I hated school because it was, you're dragging a kid through their worst nightmare because you're forcing them to do something they can't, And I remember staying after school and having a teacher actually work one-on-one when I said, look, I don't get how, I think it was math, and I said, I don't get how these two, what you're doing with those. Well, let me show you. And it was like, bang, I got it. And then I move on. Where I couldn't do that in a classroom. And I was thriving. And I'm just, when you're talking about the son that was there at this special college, that I'm just like, I almost feel like I want to cry because it's like, oh my gosh, if I would have had something like that, what a difference that would have made in my life. And I think it's fantastic kids get that now.
Oh, it is, and unfortunately, a lot of the students who go there are students who couldn't hack it, at other schools.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that our son went there is I think he said to him because his therapist had recommended the school. His therapist said, I get so many kids who make it through high school and they think they're done with me, and then I get a call from them in December because they've just flunked out of college in half a year because they couldn't hack college.
Yeah.
And our son, maybe he's certainly smart enough. Maybe he could have done college. Maybe he could have struggled. Maybe he could have gotten through it. Maybe he would have done well. We don't know, but he's certainly thriving at the school that he's at.
Well, I say this not to be bragging, but it's like I was actually top of my class in chemistry. I self-taught in music. I was just like, I always knew I had, and I don't want to say better than average, but I was very capable of doing about anything I really put my mind to. And yet it's
how typically Asperger, yeah.
Yeah.
When you find your area of interest, you
yes.
laser focus on it and you master it. And you don't need a lot of help. You just need to get pointed in the right direction when you start.
Matter of fact, I kind of almost remember a time in school where I started doing translations of like how they were saying things, but then into my own language I could understand it. It's a way of putting it. It wasn't exactly what I was always thinking, but so basically, I was, in a way, you were sort of self-teaching yourself. It was, I don't know how to, it's hard. Like I was guessing in the chemistry class, I took notes in a certain way that I could go home and then learn them. And it was just, I don't feel like I was learning the same way all the other kids were learning. But it's just, I don't know. It's just, I wish I could go back, and start over at with this knowledge and just and in a way that's what I want to do now with the rest of my life. I have my grandmother on my father's side lived to 100, so I figure I might have another 40 years if I play this right, and I can do a lot in 40 years, and that's my goal. I'm going to I in a sense I've told people. I discovered I was autistic on January 2nd of this year, and that's my new birthday, and it's sort of the way it feels. I really want to, and when I say I'm embracing the autism, I don't know if I'm that different than you. Right now, I guess I'm learning about it. I want to learn about this to kind of understand how it's affecting my life. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to not be part of the neurotypical society, but maybe now I can understand myself well enough to know how to really to fit in. Oh, I'm going on all these are tangents. Does that sound familiar too? I'm losing my thoughts here. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I went completely blank.
Oh, well, what you're reminding me of is, when I was always one of the people who had trouble, as autistic spectrum people, looking people in the eye.
Yeah.
People would say, "Why don't you look me in the eye?" And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to because it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I was practicing law, I would sit in the courtroom and I would fidget. And people didn't, and people didn't understand. And there was a particular judge who, as it turns out, was even more messed up than me, and ended up getting removed from the bench for a bunch of things. But I would be sitting in his courtroom waiting for my case to get called, and I was sitting there just kind of fidgeting, and it drove him nuts. And and it got to the point, and it got to the point where I didn't want to be in his courtroom, and he didn't want me in it. And at the time, I had no idea why I was, why I was fidgeting so much.
Right.
I had no idea why I was, I would say inappropriate things, and I had no idea why I would say, why I was saying them. I understand now it's a combination of Asperger's, and anxiety.
Executive function.
And you can't go back and do those things again. You don't get a You don't get a second chance to deal with this client or say this to that judge or act this way with another lawyer or be this or act differently at a job interview or whatever. You just can't do it.
I think it's fantastic that you you became a lawyer, that you had the self-discipline and control to go through that. These are the kind of things that I'm starting to realize about myself, and it hurts in a lot of ways. But to say, I don't think I could do it. I don't know if I could do it now. Maybe I could, but I'm starting to become very realistic about, because I kind of had the attitude like, I can do anything I want to. Well, no, Tom, you can't. I mean, in a sense, yes, I could focus on things and learn stuff, but when it came to career, it was sort of like I think it was a combination of the stress and all of that. So I really, that's fantastic. I think I wish I could have done what you had done. I was focused on something and actually made something of myself, because I have in a certain sense, but where I'm at now, I've sort of fallen apart career-wise.
Yeah, well, my father, who was my relationship with him was, I understand now, was not the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, boy.
My father died in 2012. And by early 2013, I was coming home from my office, and my wife said, I was just complaining I'd come home and everything was just complaining about my law practice. She said, you were miserable. And I had known I was miserable, and she said, why don't you quit? And I took that, and it was like it was a license to do that. And I didn't realize until, and as I said, my father at that point had probably died. He died 3 or 4 months before that, and I didn't really understand that I probably just been plugging away at it for as long as I did, just because that's kind of what he expected of me.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that he could go around and say, my son the lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Or and that and I hated it, and I wasn't. I certainly was smart enough to be a lawyer.
Uh-huh.
I could try a case. I could read the law. I could understand it. But it's a very social profession, and if you're not and if you don't have any social abilities, you're not you're not going to go far.
Gotcha.
And you're not going to succeed. You're not going to have a successful practice in the way that we keep score, which is with money. Right. And I've been very fortunate, that able to quit, and that, and it's only because my my wife's financial situation that I was able to do that.
Wow, good. I'm glad you were able to do that. I mean, that's worked out for you. We're about 10 minutes till we're in a full hour, and I know you said your phone might start kicking you if you push it much further.
It's actually behaving. It's actually about 2/3 full.
I had said before we got on the air here that if there's something you could say to the neurotypical community and something to the neurodiverse community that you have learned about in your life that might be of something that would be of value, is there? If that's too short of a notice to think of something, let me know. But if something just comes to mind,
it's not that hard.
Cool.
I think the main thing that the main thing that I've come away with is to be much more cautious about judging people. Judging people on the surface, because one of the things that over the last 5 years that I've begun to be able to do is to deal with people, and my wife as well, and after several minutes with them, they'll say to each other, "That person seems Asperger to you?" And we go, "Yeah, absolutely." And there's and I'm sure most of the people that we stayed at, or the majority of them, probably would have no idea that they're acting oddly to the world at large, but absolutely typically of people on the autistic spectrum to us. My message to the neurotypical world would be, don't be so quick to judge, and to be more accepting, and it's like being the Walking Dead. You don't know the moment when when you're one of us.
Yeah. Well, I've met some of the nicest people, and like you say, one of my best friends. She's my best friend of all times, actually, really. And she was one of the first people when I had discovered I was on the spectrum. She had a YouTube channel, and I took what they called the ASPE quiz. And it's what she had listed on her, and she just talked about it. And it's the first time when I saw her and saw her talking about it, I go, you know what? She seems actually. I mean, I can relate to her. I mean, I when she talked, but it ends up. Long story short, was that she has some incredible sensory issues. She's got synesthesia that she should.
I synesthesia where you see where you have color and taste, things like numbers.
Crossover between senses. Yeah. She this is just a very short thing, but she when she listens to classical music that has no words to it, which is most classical music.
Right.
She says I can only listen to it very, very rarely and occasionally, because she literally almost, these are my words, not hers, but she almost hallucinates. She has taken, the music actually takes her a full sensory experience into the music. She hears it, she tastes it, she sees it, she smells it, and there's a whole story unfolds through that music, and it's the same story every time she hears it, and it gets more and more elaborate. She sees more, she smells more, she tastes more. I mean, and she's written down She's written down the stories a few times that I've read, and they're pretty cool. I mean, and it's amazing that, I mean, it's hard to describe. They're not like a story of like a novel, but it's totally visual. It's an experience that she's writing. This is why it's so different. But anyway, I just bring her up because if you met her, you would never know of what she's dealing with, and I mean a lot. She's got such sensitivity on her shoulders and her whole top of her body that she's up in Canada, and during the cold months of winter, she can't wear a coat. So she has to go from the house. She might put something on just to not literally get frostbite, and then go out to a warm car. You know what I mean? So and I guess I'm just sort of supporting what you were saying about neurotypicals and even neurodiverse people not being judgmental of each other, because we are all so very different.
Yeah, well, I can't say, I'm not trying to save the whole world, I'm just trying to save us. Yeah,
and there's so much. That's why I'm doing these videos. I really do think that what you and I have talked about tonight is going to help other people. And I'm expanding more and more out the type of people I'm going to interview. But I think if you ever feel that there's more you want to talk about, I think you would have you've got a lot more experiences probably we could even still talk about. We could probably talk for hours, to be honest with you.
I don't have any more. I mean, you and I are almost the same age. I don't have any more experience than you. I've just had a little bit longer to think about the experiences that I've had than you.
Yeah.
Because one thing I can tell you is the things that happened long ago that I viewed one way or I didn't understand when I came to see them through the filter.
Yes.
A few years ago, I would revisit them and I would see them through the filter of Asperger's, and I would say, "Oh, that looks different now."
Oh yeah.
Or things that didn't fit before fit. Or sometimes I would see them through the filter of Asperger's, and I would say they make more sense, but they don't fit completely. And then I would see them, and then I would see them through, anger issues, or I would see them through, or I would see them as an acting out of narcissist roles, and things that happened 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yes.
That I never understood as I now understand the dynamic of the relationships in my family, or
Yes.
Asperger's, or whatever. When I see things that happen that I haven't thought of in decades, suddenly
Yes.
they make sense.
Yes, and I think that's one of the people. I'll see. Go ahead. I'm
They're not
sorry.
any happier, but I understand why things happened the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
Why this person acted like that towards me, why I shut down, or why I was so traumatized, or whatever.
Yeah.
Or why people were acting in inexplicable ways that suddenly are quite explicable.
Yeah.
When you understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And too bad. And it was too bad I had to be probably 56 or 7 or 8 before I started to be able to do that.
Yeah, I know. Well, you all days come from one day, and you can't change the past. So we do start from today, and we go forward. And it's been great talking with you, Gary. I really thank you for taking the time here. You've been a fascinating person to talk to, and I've learned a lot from you. I mean, there's a lot I can think about in a different way now talking with you. So I appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad I could help you out. When you asked me to do this originally, I was I didn't respond. I was of two minds about doing it. And then when the second time, when you said, would you want to do this or not? And I said to myself, you've got to be able, if you can't talk about it, then you're still kind of messed up. And if there's anything I have to say that anybody can identify with, or anybody can say that's me, then I should come forward and say it.
Good. I think you, well, I'll give you a link to where this is going to be posted, and you can watch the comments. And there's like 40 people that are subscribed, but some of the things I've posted have gotten, I think, 100 or so views. And and it's interesting to see people's comments, and a lot of them are on the spectrum and say, wow, I never thought about it that way, or, thank you. And so I know this is how, it's just a few people now, but hopefully one of these days I'll have maybe thousands of people, and hopefully they'll be getting something from all this and going back and watching yours again and all of that. So I think I appreciate you spending the time and sharing your story. So thank you very much.
Well, it really was my pleasure, and I'm glad that you asked me, and I'm
good.
And I hope it went well. I hope people get something from it, and appreciate you sending me the link. And I think
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know how you go about publicizing things that you have, to do it, but you never know. It seems like if you find the right place to say, this is what I do, it may never become a viral sensation.
Well, I always said if I literally just touch one person's life, then it's worth it, So if I've touched 10, it's 10 times worth it, And I had just a really short story. About 2-3 months ago, I contacted the National Autism Society, the local chapter here in Ohio, and they invited me out to the board meeting, and they said, come on out, and so I met with everyone, and then they actually invited me to be part of the board. Well, the lady who chairs the board, she had put my name in to the National Autism Society out of Bethesda, Maryland. They were sending a team to our area to do a video of their gala, for their gala that they were having this month. And so they invited me to be part of the videotaping. And ended up, I met a man there. His name is Thomas McKean. And he and Temple Grandin and 2 others were the ones responsible for setting up autism awareness in April. And so he was there in the room when I was videotaping, and I contacted him just a few days ago, and he sent me his response just absolutely blew me away. He was saying, I hope that you go on to be an advocate, because he said, in 25 years there have been very, very few people that would say, you've got something, you need to pursue this. And so I'm hoping that this is all part of something that this is my passion and my calling, in a sense, is to sort of give back. And I hope this takes me, I hope the road keeps going that direction. Things seem to be opening up, and so we'll see, we'll see where this leads. So, okay, well, Gary, I'm going to wrap it up. You still there? Oop, somehow I lost you. I bet you his phone died. Yep. Okay, well, that's one way to end a conversation. Thank you all for joining me. And that was Gary Berkowitz out of Rhode Island. And thank you, Gary, again. And I'll send all this information to you. So we'll end this version of Discovering Autism. And thank you all for joining me. Good day.